Marcus had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a small, tight-knit neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, he often found himself staring out of his bedroom window, imagining a life far beyond the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. His parents worked hard, his father as a mechanic and his mother cleaning offices late into the night, but they never complained. They taught Marcus the value of determination and told him that education was his ticket to something better. He took those lessons to heart, excelling in school and earning scholarships that led him to college and eventually law school. By his mid-30s, Marcus seemed unstoppable. He landed a prestigious job at one of Chicago's top law firms, wearing tailored suits and attending meetings with people whose names appeared in newspapers. On paper, he had everything: a successful career, a beautiful home, and a loving family. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show. His wife, Angela, was nothing like him. While Marcus chased promotions and accolades, Angela poured her energy into their community. She organized food drives, mentored teenagers, and marched in protests demanding justice for victims of police brutality. Her passion for activism inspired many, but it also created tension between them. Their arguments usually started over little things: a missed dinner here, a forgotten promise there, but they always circled back to the same issue: priorities. Marcus believed Angela's work was noble but questioned whether it could truly make a difference. "You're fighting an uphill battle," he'd say, shaking his head. "The system is too big to change." Angela would counter by reminding him of their roots. "That's exactly why we have to fight," she'd reply, her voice firm yet tinged with sadness. "People are suffering, Marcus. We can't just look away." Despite their differences, they loved each other deeply. They shared laughter, quiet moments on the porch, and dreams of raising their two young sons to be kind, strong men. Yet, as the months went by, Marcus felt increasingly suffocated by Angela's dedication to causes he didn't fully understand. He wanted a simpler life, a life where success meant financial stability, not constant struggle. One evening, after another heated argument about how much time he spent at work versus how little he contributed at home, Marcus made a decision. Standing in their dimly lit kitchen, he looked at Angela and said, "I can't keep doing this." Her eyes widened, searching his face for some sign that he didn't mean it. But Marcus turned and walked out the door without looking back. That night, he drove aimlessly through the city, convincing himself that leaving was the right choice. He told himself he needed space, freedom, a chance to focus on his goals without distractions. What he didn't realize, however, was that walking away wouldn't bring him peace. It would only leave him haunted by questions he wasn't ready to answer. After leaving Angela, Marcus dove headfirst into his career, determined to prove that he had made the right choice. The days blurred together as he worked late nights at the office, reviewed case files over weekends, and attended networking events where everyone seemed eager to celebrate his achievements. His colleagues admired his dedication, calling him a rising star. But inside, Marcus felt hollow. The praise and promotions brought fleeting satisfaction, leaving him restless and unsure of what he truly wanted. He moved into a sleek apartment downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. At first, the modern furniture and minimalist decor felt like symbols of his independence, a fresh start. But as weeks turned into months, the silence in the apartment grew louder. There were no more shared meals, no laughter from their sons running through the halls, no Angela humming softly while cooking dinner. Instead, Marcus spent his evenings scrolling through work emails or staring out the window, wondering if he'd traded something irreplaceable for a life that felt increasingly empty. To fill the void, Marcus began dating casually, meeting women at social gatherings or through mutual friends. Some were charming, others intelligent, but none sparked the deep connection he once shared with Angela. Conversations often revolved around surface-level topics: work, hobbies, travel plans, and rarely ventured into meaningful territory. After a few dates, Marcus would politely distance himself, unable to shake the feeling that these relationships lacked substance. Deep down, he knew he was comparing everyone to Angela, even though he refused to admit it. Meanwhile, Angela carried on with quiet resilience. She stayed in their old neighborhood, determined to keep their family afloat despite the emotional toll of Marcus's absence. With two young boys to raise and bills to pay, life wasn't easy, but Angela found strength in her community. Neighbors rallied around her, offering help when needed, and she leaned heavily on her faith and friendships to get through tough days. Her activism became both a lifeline and a purpose, giving her a sense of fulfillment that Marcus's departure couldn't take away. As the months passed, Marcus convinced himself that Angela had moved on without him. He imagined her thriving, surrounded by supportive friends, and finding happiness in her work. It was easier to think of her as strong and independent rather than confronting the pain he might have caused. In his mind, their separation was a clean break, a necessary step for both of them to grow. What he didn't know was that Angela's reality was far more complicated than he could have guessed. While Marcus built a new life centered around ambition and solitude, Angela faced challenges he couldn't begin to understand. Late at night, after tucking their sons into bed, she sometimes allowed herself to cry, grieving the loss of the partnership they once had. Yet even in her darkest moments, Angela never lost sight of her mission. She poured her heart into organizing protests, mentoring youth, and advocating for justice, knowing that her work mattered, not just for her community but for the future of her children. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Angela's journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would ripple through both their lives in ways neither of them could anticipate. Years slipped by, and Marcus settled into his routine of long workdays and solitary nights. He rarely thought about Angela or the life they once shared. If her name came up in conversation, he brushed it off with a casual remark about how things didn't work out. To him, their separation felt like a distant memory, a chapter closed and best left untouched. But fate had other plans. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus found himself attending a charity gala hosted by one of his firm's clients. The event was held in a grand ballroom adorned with sparkling chandeliers and towering floral arrangements. Guests mingled over champagne, discussing philanthropy and exchanging business cards, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Marcus adjusted his tie and scanned the room, half listening to conversations as he sipped his drink. It was all familiar territory for him: polished smiles, polite small talk, and carefully curated appearances. Then, something caught his eye across the room. At first, he wasn't sure what it was: a flash of color, perhaps, or a familiar laugh. But when he turned to look more closely, his breath hitched in his throat. There she was, Angela. She stood near the entrance, speaking animatedly with a group of women. Her presence commanded attention, just as it always had. But it wasn't just Angela who made Marcus freeze. It was the four identical little girls clustered around her, giggling uncontrollably as they clung to her hands. They wore matching dresses in shades of lavender, their curly hair styled in neat braids adorned with tiny bows. Marcus blinked, convinced he must be imagining things. Quadruplets. How could that even be possible? His mind raced as he tried to piece together the timeline. Had Angela been pregnant when they separated? Why hadn't she told him? A wave of confusion and guilt washed over him as he realized how much of her life had unfolded without him. For years, he'd assumed she was thriving on her own, building a new world separate from his. Now, standing there watching her interact with those children, he felt an unsettling mix of awe and regret. Unable to tear his gaze away, Marcus watched as Angela knelt down to speak to the girls, her face lighting up with warmth and love. The way she looked at them reminded him of how she used to look at their sons, the same tenderness, the same pride. It struck him then how much he had missed. These little girls were part of his family too, yet they were complete strangers to him. The realization hit hard, leaving him rooted to the spot as emotions churned inside him. Eventually, one of the girls noticed him staring and tugged on Angela's sleeve, pointing in his direction. Angela glanced up, her smile faltering as her eyes met his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the gala faded into the background, replaced by a heavy silence that hung between them. Marcus wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. Instead, he took a hesitant step forward, drawn to her despite the years and distance that separated them. Whatever happened next, he knew this encounter would change everything. The gala felt smaller somehow, as if the walls had closed in around Marcus. Every step he took toward Angela felt heavier than the last, each footfall echoing in his mind. He wasn't sure what to say or how to begin. The sight of her with the quadruplets had thrown him off balance, and now, standing face to face with her after all these years, he felt like a stranger in his own life. Angela's expression was unreadable at first, her brow slightly furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She straightened up, gently guiding the girls behind her as though shielding them from an approaching storm. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice calm but clipped. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with just enough distance to remind him that they were no longer partners in anything. "Angela," Marcus replied, his tone softer than he intended. He glanced down at the four little faces peeking out from behind her legs. Their wide, curious eyes studied him intently, unblinking. "These are yours?" he asked hesitantly, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. Angela nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, they're mine." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Then, almost reluctantly, she added, "And technically, they're yours too." Marcus's heart sank. The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. Instead, he looked back at the girls, trying to find traces of himself in their features. Their smiles were bright, their cheeks rosy, and there was something undeniably familiar about the way one of them tilted her head when she spoke. "I didn't know," Marcus managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea." Angela crossed her arms, her posture guarded. "You left, Marcus. You walked out before I even knew I was pregnant. I tried reaching out after I found out. It wasn't easy keeping this secret, but you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with us. So I stopped trying." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Marcus remembered those days vividly, the late-night arguments, the growing resentment, the moment he walked out the door without looking back. He told himself it was for the best, that he needed space to focus on his career. But hearing Angela recount it now, stripped of any sugarcoating, forced him to confront the reality of what he'd done. He hadn't just left her, he'd abandoned his family. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly, lowering his gaze. The apology felt inadequate, hollow even, but it was all he could muster in that moment. "I never meant for things to turn out this way." Angela sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. She glanced down at the girls, who were still watching the exchange with innocent curiosity. "They deserve better than this," she said firmly, her voice tinged with both sadness and resolve. "Better than being caught in the middle of whatever this is." Marcus nodded, guilt gnawing at him. "You're right," he admitted. "They deserve so much more. And so do you." He hesitated, then added, "Can we talk? Somewhere private? Please." For a long moment, Angela didn't respond. She seemed to weigh his request, searching his face for sincerity. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Fine," she said, "but not tonight. Tomorrow morning. Meet me at the cafe on 5th Street. Relief washed over Marcus, though he knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult conversation. As Angela ushered the girls away, he couldn't help but notice how natural she looked with them, how effortlessly she balanced love, patience, and strength. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a flicker of hope mingled with overwhelming regret. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He owed it to Angela, to the girls, and to himself to try to make amends, even if it meant facing the painful truth about the years he'd lost. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe on 5th Street well before their agreed-upon time. He chose a quiet corner table where he could watch the door without drawing too much attention. His mind raced as he sipped his coffee, rehearsing what he wanted to say, but knowing no words could fully capture the storm of emotions swirling inside him. When Angela finally walked in with the quadruplets in tow, his heart skipped a beat. She looked different in the daylight, calmer, yet still guarded. The girls, however, were anything but subdued. They bounced around her legs, giggling, and pointing at the pastries displayed behind the counter. Angela spotted Marcus immediately and approached the table with measured steps. "Girls," she said gently, kneeling down to meet their curious eyes, "this is your father." The word hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Marcus felt his throat tighten as 4 pairs of eyes turned to study him. One of them tilted her head, mirroring the gesture he'd noticed the night before. Another reached out hesitantly, tugging at Angela's sleeve. "Is he really our daddy?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with wonder. "Yes," Angela replied simply, glancing up at Marcus. Her tone was neutral, neither inviting nor discouraging further questions. Marcus leaned forward slightly, offering a tentative smile. "Hi, girls," he said, his voice warm despite the nervous tremor beneath it. I'm so happy to meet you." The words sounded clumsy even to his own ears, but they seemed to work. One of the girls grinned broadly, while another hid shyly behind Angela's leg. A third boldly stepped closer, inspecting him like a scientist examining a rare specimen. "You look funny," she declared, earning a laugh from her sisters. Angela sighed but couldn't suppress a small smile. "Be polite," she reminded them gently before turning back to Marcus. "They're energetic," she said dryly, though there was a hint of pride in her voice. Over the next hour, Marcus listened intently as Angela explained how the quadruplets came into their lives, a surprise pregnancy discovered shortly before their separation, and shared glimpses of the challenges she faced raising them alongside their older brothers. She spoke matter-of-factly, avoiding any trace of bitterness, but her stories painted a vivid picture of sleepless nights, endless sacrifices, and moments of joy that made it all worthwhile. As the conversation unfolded, Marcus began to see Angela in a new light, not just as the woman he once loved, but as someone who had carried unimaginable burdens alone. He admired her resilience, her ability to find strength when life felt overwhelming. By the time they parted ways, Marcus knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose, a desire not just to reconnect with Angela, but to build a relationship with the daughters he never knew he had. Over the weeks that followed, Marcus made a conscious effort to be present in the lives of his daughters and Angela. It wasn't easy. Years of absence couldn't be erased overnight, and Marcus often felt like an outsider looking in. But he was determined to change that. He started small, spending weekends with the girls at Angela's house, playing board games, reading bedtime stories, and helping them with homework. At first, they were hesitant, their curious stares mixing with cautious smiles. But as Marcus showed up consistently, showing genuine interest in their lives, their walls began to come down. One Saturday afternoon, while the girls played outside, Marcus found himself sitting across from Angela at her kitchen table. The air between them was less tense now, though still tinged with unspoken history. "You've done an incredible job with them," Marcus said sincerely, glancing toward the window where the quadruplets were chasing each other around the yard. "I don't know how you managed everything on your own." Angela looked up from her cup of tea, her expression softening slightly. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "There were days when I didn't think I could keep going. But I had no choice. They needed me. And honestly, this community has been my backbone. People stepped up when I needed help, whether it was babysitting or just listening when I needed to vent." Her words struck a chord deep within Marcus. For years, he'd distanced himself from the neighborhood, dismissing Angela's activism as impractical. But now, seeing the tangible impact of her work, the community gardens thriving, teenagers leading workshops, murals celebrating Black resilience, he realized how much he'd missed. Slowly, he began attending events alongside Angela, volunteering at food drives, and even offering pro bono legal advice to families facing eviction or discrimination. At first, Marcus felt out of place, unsure if he truly belonged in spaces so different from his corporate world. But as he listened to people share their stories of struggle, hope, and resistance, he began to understand why Angela had dedicated herself to this cause. These weren't abstract issues discussed in boardrooms. These were real lives affected by systemic injustice. And for the first time, Marcus saw his privilege not as something to take pride in, but as a tool he could use to make a difference. The more involved Marcus became, the closer he grew to Angela and the girls. He attended rallies organized by local activists, standing shoulder to shoulder with Angela, as chants of "Black Lives Matter" echoed through the streets. One evening, after a particularly powerful march, one of the quadruplets tugged at his hand. "Daddy, why are we fighting?" she asked innocently. Marcus knelt down to meet her eye level, choosing his words carefully. "We're fighting because everyone deserves to be treated fairly," he explained. "And sometimes people have to stand together to make sure that happens." The little girl nodded thoughtfully before grinning up at him. "Okay, I want to fight too." Her enthusiasm brought tears to Marcus's eyes. In that moment, he realized how much he'd grown, not just as a father, but as a person. Through Angela's guidance and the love of his daughters, he was learning to see the world differently. For the first time in years, Marcus felt aligned with something greater than himself, a legacy of justice, compassion, and unity that he wanted to pass on to the next generation. As months turned into years, Marcus's transformation became undeniable, not just to those around him, but to himself. The man who once walked away from his family and dismissed Angela's activism as unrealistic was now deeply embedded in the very world he had once ignored. He wasn't just showing up for his daughters. He was showing up for their community, using his skills and resources to amplify voices that had long been silenced. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were moments of doubt, disagreements with Angela about how best to move forward, and even resistance from some neighbors who questioned his intentions. But Marcus persevered, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. Angela, too, began to soften toward him. At first, she kept her guard up, wary of trusting someone who had caused her so much pain. But over time, she saw the sincerity in his actions. The late nights spent preparing legal documents for families in need, the way he cheered on their daughters at school plays, the quiet respect he showed when listening to others' stories. Slowly, reluctantly, Angela allowed herself to believe that Marcus's change was genuine. Their partnership, though not romantic, grew stronger as they worked side by side, combining his expertise with her grassroots passion to tackle issues like housing inequality, police brutality, and educational disparities. For the quadruplets, having their father back in their lives was both exciting and confusing. They adored him, clinging to his arms during outings and proudly introducing him to their friends. Yet there were moments when old wounds resurfaced. One evening, after overhearing adults talk about Marcus leaving years ago, one of the girls asked tearfully, "Daddy, did you leave because of us?" Marcus's heart broke at the question. Kneeling down, he pulled her close. "No, sweetheart," he said firmly. "I left because I made a mistake. I thought I could build a better life somewhere else, but I didn't realize what really mattered was right here. You, your sisters, your brothers, and your mom. You're my whole world. And I'm so sorry it took me so long to figure that out." His honesty seemed to ease her fears, and soon enough, she was smiling again, skipping off to join her sisters. But the conversation stayed with Marcus, reinforcing his commitment to being present, not just physically, but emotionally. Outside their home, Marcus and Angela's collaboration began to gain attention. Together, they launched initiatives that bridged gaps between underserved communities and institutions of power. Marcus organized workshops teaching young people about their legal rights, while Angela mentored them on how to advocate for themselves. Their combined efforts created ripples of change, inspiring others to join the fight for justice. Though reconciliation wasn't immediate or perfect, Marcus and Angela found a rhythm that worked. They weren't the couple they used to be, and that was okay. They were something different now, partners in advocacy, co-parents united by love for their children, and allies in the struggle for equity. For Marcus, this new chapter brought redemption. For Angela, it brought validation that her unwavering dedication had inspired growth in someone she once thought lost. And for their daughters, it brought the promise of a brighter future shaped by unity, resilience, and hope. Years later, Marcus stood shoulder to shoulder with Angela at a massive rally in the heart of Chicago. The crowd stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of people united under banners bearing slogans like "Justice for All" and "Black Lives Matter." The energy was electric, fueled by chants, drum beats, and the unwavering determination of those who refused to stay silent. But what made this moment truly special was the group leading the charge. Their quadruplets, now teenagers, standing confidently at the front of the stage. The girls had grown into outspoken advocates, just like their mother. They organized protests, spoke at community meetings, and used social media to amplify marginalized voices. Today, they were addressing the crowd, their words sharp yet filled with hope. One of them gripped the microphone tightly, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "We're here because we believe in a better future," she declared. "A future where everyone is treated equally, no matter the color of their skin or where they come from. And we're not backing down until we get there." Marcus watched with pride swelling in his chest, tears glistening in his eyes. These were his daughters, the same little girls he'd met years ago at that charity gala, wide-eyed and curious. Now, they were fearless leaders, using their platform to demand change. He glanced over at Angela, who stood nearby with a small smile playing on her lips. Her gaze was fixed on the girls, but when she caught Marcus looking, she nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd all come together. After the rally, the family gathered backstage, exhausted but exhilarated. The quadruplets buzzed with excitement, replaying highlights from the event while their older brothers chimed in with playful teasing. Marcus listened intently, marveling at the bond they shared. This was what family meant, not perfection, but resilience, not always agreeing, but finding ways to move forward together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Marcus pulled Angela aside for a private moment. "I never thought I'd be here," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just here at this rally, but here, part of something bigger than myself. With you. With them." He gestured toward the girls, who were now laughing hysterically over some inside joke. Angela placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "You earned your place here, Marcus," she said softly. "It wasn't easy, for any of us. But look at what we've built. Look at what they've become." Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "They're amazing," he said. "And it's because of you. You never gave up on them, or on me, even when I didn't deserve it." Angela smiled, her eyes reflecting the same mix of strength and kindness that had always drawn him to her. "We're a team now," she replied simply. "That's what matters." In that moment, Marcus realized how much his life had transformed since the day he walked out of their kitchen all those years ago. Back then, he'd been chasing success without understanding its true meaning. Now, surrounded by his family and the community they served, he finally understood. Success wasn't about titles or accolades. It was about connection, purpose, and leaving a legacy rooted in love and justice. As fireworks lit up the night sky, celebrating another step forward in the fight for equality, Marcus wrapped an arm around Angela and looked out at the cheering crowd. Together, they had turned pain into power, loss into unity, and broken paths into bridges. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it proved that even the hardest journeys can lead to brighter futures when guided by compassion, resilience, and the unshakable belief that change is possible.